Hope you're all doing well. Today we're learning Maseches Bava Metzia Daf Membeis, and we are starting at the very top of Membeis Amud Aleph with a new Mishnah. And the Mishnah writes as follows: Hamafkid Mos Eitzel Chavero. If you entrust me to watch some of your money, you give me some coins. If Tziraran v'Yivshilan la'achorav, I put them in I wrap them up, I tie them up in some type of garment, and I have it slung over my shoulder. Oh, Shemisaran Livno Ulevito Haktanim, or I give it to one of my young children to watch. V'no'al bifnehem shelo karoi, and with those children, I did not give them the right shmira. So then chayev. It's important to note over here that there's a discussion in what the girsa is in this Mishnah. Is it v'no'al bifnehem, that it wasn't locked up properly with the children, or is it kids are over with, or sheno'al bifnehem shelo karoi, or forget the kids, not a din in the kids, but that just in general, if you don't lock it up properly. So that's a machlokas in girsa. Seemingly the older girsos had it at the word o. Anyway, either way, in all of these cases, if something then happens to the money, chayev shelo shimer kederach hashomrim, because you didn't do what seems to be your minimum responsibilities as a shomer. Im shimer kederach hashomrim pater. But if whatever type of shmira you did was appropriate for the shmira that you're supposed to do, then the din is that you're pater. Says the Gemara, I understand most of the cases in our Mishnah, but not all of them. Bishlam akulhu shelo shimer kederach hashomrim. I understand most of the cases as to how it could be shelo shimer kederach hashomrim, except for the first case. Ela tzirorin v'yishilan la'achorov. Mai havalei lemevad. That's not an abnormal way to carry things. Let's just use our equivalent. It's a backpack. Okay, so like you're wearing the bag on your back. That's not derech hashomrim. That's not considered to be shimer kederach hashomrim. So says the Gemara. No, it's not. Amar Rav, Amar Rav Yitzchak, Amar Krav, Itzarta hakesef biyadecha. Afal pishat tzrurin yehu biyadcha. Even if in fact it's biyadcha, not biyadecha. Even if in fact they are tzrurin, it has to be in your hand. Now, if this Gemara is ladina, then it in fact means that your level of shmira when you're holding it is that it has to be in your hands. What about your pocket? What about your back pocket versus your front pocket? What about a backpack versus a fanny pack? So again, we're using our modern examples, but it seems over here that even if they're tzururin, even if they're all wrapped up in a garment of some kind, you need to mamish be holding them in your hand in order for your shmira to count.
It would seem like the backpack is actually safer.
That's what.
For somebody to steal it or for it to fall off, drop it, right? Drop it. It's also a strange place to learn from.
Well,
Meister Sheni is how much shmira. You take the money in your hand.
You mean the pasuk? Yeah, that's good. The Gemara does not pick up on that. That's a great question.
So depending on the size of how many coins it is, also, etc. Right.
That's of course. I mean, that's why we have Rishonim. But your question should have been in the Gemara. Your question should have been asked by the Gemara. Afal pishat tzrurin.
Yeah. So guess what? That's a mitzvah. You're a mishon. You know what I'm saying?
Great distinction. Great distinction.
That's interesting.
Okay, good question. The Gemara doesn't ask that question. A person should always have their money ready at their hands. I don't know what that means. Does that mean you always have your money available? I don't know. It's very interesting. Rashi says, biyado, matzui biyado, second line, lo yafkidenu le'acherim, you shouldn't have them elsewhere. You should have available cash for spending. Yeah, keep it in the mattress. Although Venmo, Chase Quickly, things are very different. Yeah, so things now are very different. But we'll see now what the Gemara today is going to actually discuss what the safest place to keep money is in their day. Obviously, by us, we would like to say a bank. I was in Lurie Children's Hospital. I hope. Is it FDIC insured? So just today, Mamish, I was in Lurie's for a bris. Jewish family, the baby had an issue. Anyways, while I was there, I was talking to the dad. The dad was a tech guy. He said that the hospital there was hacked, which I was not. I didn't know about this.
About a month ago.
It was hacked. All their medical records were locked up, and they were ransomed for $2 million in Bitcoin. And he told me to. And he told me that they refused.
Were they there the whole time? This family, or have they just been there?
only for this surgery, and the kid's 10 months old. No, there was just
My wife and a friend took a kid, whatever, they're walking around the hospital.
yeah, paper tray. Yeah, it was unbelievable. It's like 1980s. Yeah, unbelievable. So obviously, like, when we, and I'll even introduce this halachically, like when we talk about the achrayus of a shomer, is it safer than a safe in your house? Like, again, I'm not, they're both shmira, but we have gradations in halacha as to what is a better shmira or a worse shmira. And we know how prevalent these things are. They happen every day. And they're ma'asim b'chol yom. It's not one in a million. It's one in 1,000. It's one in a few hundred, whatever. Okay, we'll get to that a little bit later. 10 lines down. You should split up your money, your available money, into thirds. Shalosh bekarka, real estate. Please call Gerald Cost for more information. Vishlish beprakmatia, a third for investments in objects. Vishlish tachas yadon, you should have a third of your cash always available. Of course, this ignores tzedakah. That doesn't mean that. It just means that for your liquid cash, for your accessible money. He says that there is no bracha unless something is hidden from your eye. Shneimar yitzav Hashem yitachas habracha be'osmecha. Tana devei Rabbi Shmuel and bracha mitzel b'davar she'ein ha'ayin sholetes bo. A similar idea, but it's not samoi min ha'ayin, which means hidden, but it's where your ayin is not sholetes, where you can't see. Same pasuk. Shneimar yitzav Hashem yitachas habracha be'osmecha. The Gemara that we're about to learn a third of the way down, I've never learned, and it's quoted explicitly in Shulchan Aruch. Says the Gemara Tana Rabbanan, Haholech lamod as gorno. If you're going to measure how much grain you have, so as you approach to do the measuring, Omer yihiratzon milefanecha Hashem Elokeinu shetishlach bracha b'maaseh yadeinu. In the unknown phase of how much you have, you don't know how much there is. You say this yihiratzon. Hischil lamod. Once you actually start your counting, says the Gemara, Omer, you make a bracha. Baruch hasholeach bracha b'kri hazeh. Blessed is the one who sent bracha to this kri, to this pile of fruit or vegetables. Modad ve'achar kach birech. If you finished measuring and only then did you make the bracha, harezet tfilas shav. That bracha is a tfilas shav. It doesn't say bracha levatala, which is interesting language. Tfilas shav are used to from the Mishnayos that say, and we'll see this in a moment, that if you daven for the gender of a child, once the gender is already known, that's not the kind of nace that we're talking about. Says the Gemara, Lefisha ein ha-bracha mitzuya, lo b'davar ha-shakul, lo b'davar ha-madud, lo b'davar ha-manui, ela b'davar ha-samim min ha'ayin. The only bracha that exists, and therefore the only time you can be mevarich, is before you know the amount that you have. Shneimar yitzav Hashem yitachas habracha be'osmecha. This is quoted in Shulchan Aruch and Orach Chaim, I think Reish Lamed Beis. I'm pretty sure it's Reish Lamed Beis. And there's a discussion in the poskim as to whether or not this bracha is one that is said b'shemu malchus. The Gemara quotes it Baruch HaSholech. Is it really Baruch Atah Hashem HaSholech? Hasholech bracha, whatever the language was. Hasholech bracha b'kri hazeh. So first of all, if it's not dealing with trumos and maasros, you don't make the bracha. It's not stam. Although maybe if one is going to check their bank account and it's unknown how much money they have in their bank account, they check Monday mornings, whatever. L'chora, there's no reason why we shouldn't be saying this. Now, you should not make the bracha b'shem malchus because it's not trumos and maasros. The poskim also discuss what about giving trumos and maasros today, which is the Rabbanon. So some poskim taka say you still say the bracha b'shem malchus. So be careful before you do this. Ask your local Orthodox rabbi. But this is real. These are real halachos that when we're going to measure stock, when we're going to take stock in what we have, we should be saying these tefillos, these brachos. Halfway down, Amar Shmuel, Ksafim, Ein Lahem Shmira Ela B'Karka. When it comes to money, the only shmira that's appropriate, seemingly other than holding it in your hand, is burying it in the ground. Amar Rava, Umodi Shmuel, Be'erev Shabbos, Bein Hashmashos, when it comes to Erev Shabbos, during twilight, Delo Atrachuhu Rabbanon. At that time, the rabbis would not obligate you to go outside and dig and bury in the ground. What's the obvious question over here? Bein hashmashos is aser b'malacha. If not deoraisa, then certainly midrabanan. We're very makbid. At the moment we get near shkia, we back off of everything. We try to be even more makbid. So what do you mean bein hashmashos? So on the footnotes on the side over here, in Os Katan Dalet and Hagos V'Tzionim, it says bein hashmashos leisa berach. The words bein hashmashos were excluded by the rach. by the Rabbeinu Hananel. And Beshita Mekubetzes B'Shem Haramach Uve'echad Me'akis Ve'yad. It was also removed from all of those earlier footnotes, all of those earlier versions of the Gemara, I should say. Which I did not look up, and look at the Rush. So obviously we don't do this Bein Hashmashos. Of course, the Mishnayos in Perek Bama Madlikin, the second Perek of Maseches Shabbos, deals with what's allowed Bein Hashmashos, those kinds of things, because it's not Shabbos. It's close, but it's not. So then you don't have to bury it Erev Shabbos. In other words, in the Erev Shabbos rush, outside of Bein Hashmashos, even earlier, you're not obligated to bury it. Now, v'ishaha, if the shomer waited lemotzei Shabbos, he waited after Motzei Shabbos. Remember, he got this money to bury right before Shabbos. The Chachamim were not matriachim to bury it at that point because it's Erev Shabbos. If he waited lemotzei Shabbos, shiur, the amount of time lemikberinhu v'lo kavrinhu, he had enough time to bury, but he didn't. And in that time, let's say it takes 10 minutes to bury after Havdalah, and it got stolen during those 10 minutes, mechayev, because you didn't do your achrayis. Your job is to be a shomer. Okay, on Shabbos you're not obligated, not even allowed to dig. That's the Torah protecting you. But once Shabbos is over, your priority number one is to bury those items. If it's a rabbi, who savar dilma miboy le zuze la'avdalta. If it was a rav, then you don't have to bury it. Because perhaps the Rav would not want you to bury the money on Motzei Shabbos, because perhaps he has a need for Avdalta, and that is a reference to the fact that he may want to purchase wine. Take a look at Rashi, about 10, 12 lines down, Dibur Hamaschil, V'imtzor b'mirabananu, Hamafkid, shehu chared al mitzvahs Havdalah al hakos. He's very careful to do the mitzvah of Havdalah on a cup of wine. Amar Hashomer Dilma mi boy lezuzi leavdalta. Maybe he needs money to buy wine, and that's why lahachi lo kavrinhu upater. If the person you're dealing with is a Talmud Chacham, so because of Talmud Chacham, usually we have a little bit of a stockpile of wine. So because of that, it may not apply today, but back in the day, if you were a Talmud Chacham and you were makbid on halacha, so then you should really not use scotch. You should really not use Chamar Medina, which we know is mutter. The poskim discussed this, that if you have no wine, then you can use Chamar Medina, you can use coffee, you can use orange juice. The Sefer Piskei Tshuvo speaks about this. You can use soda, whatever is normal and common. You can use beer. Again, anything that's commonly in fridge, milk, all fine. That's for Chamar Medina. But again, in this case, you'd be pater if the person you're holding money for is a Talmud Chacham. Now, we said that it's good to keep things in the ground. It's good to keep money in the ground. However, the criminals typically, as we were just discussing with the Bitcoin and holding people hostage, says the Gemara, because there are those who, quote unquote, feel around. Rashi points out that the Gshushay were people who were megasheshin bekarka b'shipodin. They would take like a skewer, like a long piece of metal, and poke it in the ground until they heard metal, right? It's ki'ilu, our version of the metal detector. So then, ein lem shmir el b'shmei korah. Then you have to hide things in the ceilings. Open up your vents, open up your ceilings, and have a hiding place inside your house. Now that there are people who are willing to take apart the roof, that's what Rashi says. They're shovrei hatikra. So then, ein lem shmir ela beni orve. Among the bricks, you have the hidden brick move. Either they can't break a brick, you got to get clever. It's reasonable to keep it in a wall. Skipping the parentheses. There are people who know how to knock, and they can tell from what's hollow and what's not. So then only that which is within one tefach of the ground, or within one tefach of the ceiling. There's a svara here also, but because it's so close, the tapping will sound like the other parts of the ceiling. I remember as a little kid, the doctor used to do this thing. He would put his fingers on your chest and tap to see if there's fluid in I don't remember what he was doing. I remember as a little kid, building for Refuah, Devon and Lincoln, my doctor was Dr. Stein. So that was what he did. I don't know what he was doing. So these guys knew what they were doing. They could tap, like in my house, if you're looking for the studs and you have a good ear and you have a good feel, you can tap, and you can also measure 16 inches, but without that, you can tap and then I bought a stud finder. It was much easier. It was much, much easier. So says the Gemara, and that is why we have to be careful with our money and just keep it in a place that is most reasonable. We're 5 lines into the wide lines. Amar le Rav Acha bered Rav Yosef le Rav Ashi Hasam Tanan. Over there in Maseches Psachim, we learn the following idea: Chametz shenaf lalav mapoles. If there's chametz and a building fell on top of it, harehu kimavuar. That is considered like it has been mavuar, namely that the requirement of biur is already taken place. You no longer have a din of biur. You don't have to do bittul chametz or biur chametz on that. It's gone. And says the Gemara, Rashba Gomer, Kol She'ein HaKelev Yochol L'chapes Acharav. Depends on the dog. We know that our standard of achila is Ro'i La'achilas Kelev. And therefore, the Gemara says that as long as the dog won't be searching after it. The Tana, we have another brisa that correlates with this brisa. Kama chafisa sakelev. How long will a dog be mechapes? At what depth? Gimel tfachim. I would imagine that a dog's nose is way stronger than that. That 3 tfachim is only 1 foot. And unless it's mamish, like encased in rubble, okay. But if there's like cracks and crevices for the smells, their power of their scent is dozens of times stronger than ours. So I don't know, but that's what the Gemara says, 3 tfachim. Says the Gemara, hachamai, according to our Gemara, which we started with today in the name of Shmuel, which is a third of the halfway down, where he says, Ksaf mein lehem shmeir lebekarka. How deep was Shmuel talking about when he said his din? So says the Gemara, mi ba'in shlosha tfachim alo. Do we need the same standard of burial of, well, not really burial of mapoles, where it's 3 tfachim? Does that apply over here for the burial of money? So the Gemara says, Amar lehasa mishum reicha. When over there by the Mapoles, when the building fell on the chametz, our measure was a dog, and the dog has a koach of reach, and therefore over there we said recha, therefore ba'inan gimel tfachim. But hacha mishum ichsuye me'ena. Over here, we're not worried about smell, or we're worried about just being hidden from the eyes, and therefore lo ba'inan gimel tfachim. If it kama, okay, if it's not 3, how much is it? Amara from misichra tefach. We're now going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stories, and then it will bring us to the Mishnah on the top of Mem Gimel Amud Aleph, and then we will be done. Says the Gemara, 10 lines or so from the bottom of the page, Amar Rav Yosef, Aval Gav Del Inyan Ganve, if you have it just under the, oh, I skipped a line? Yeah. Totally skipped a line. Hu Gavra, the Ifkid Zuze Gabe Chabre. So you come over to me, say, Phil, can you please watch my money? And Osvinhu Bitsrifa de Urvani, I put it in a tzrif, I put it in some little hut that is made out of like wicker or willow, some type of very dry material. So Ignov, it got stolen. And Amar Rav Yosef, there's 2 possible versions of what Rav Yosef said, and each of them have different implications. Here's version number 1. Amar Rav Yosef, Afal Gav Del Inyan Ganvi, even though in regards to Geneva, that keeping it in that hut is netirusahi, that is considered a proper shmirah. You put it in a hut, and the hut isn't something that isn't visible, so you're doing good. However, le'inyan nura, when it comes to fire, that place is completely flammable, and therefore pshi'usahi. It's considered negligent to protect something from fire by putting it in a perfectly flammable hut. That means you didn't do your job. So says the Gemara that had that been the case, if in fact you're trying to protect something from fire and you put it in the wrong room, right? The fire's coming and you're like, let me hide it in this flammable shed. And v'sofa ba'onis, you didn't want it to get burned, but it ended up getting burned, so therefore chayiv. But v'ika da'amre, some say that Rav Yosef's din was actually different. Really, afal gav del inyan nura pshiusahi, even though we would have said that by fire it's a pshia to put the item in that little hut. Inyan ganvi, in regards to theft, netirusahi, it is considered to be netira. And if in fact you put something there and it's a pshia, namely about the nura, the sofa ba'ones pater. It's the exact opposite din within Rav Yosef. So it seems to be that there's a lack of clarity with what Rav Yosef held in regards to the din of tchilaso b'pshia v'sofa ba'ones. The Hilchasa, 5 lines from the bottom. Tchilaso b'pshia v'sofa ba'ones chayiv. End of story number 1. That if you're going to put money into a hut that's made out of something flammable, you're a good shomer in regards to theft, but you're not a good shomer in regards to fire. Story number 2, 5 lines from the bottom. You bring over money. Phil, can you please watch this? Then later you come over to me, Amar le havli zuzoi. You come say, Phil, where's the money that I gave you? I gave you 10 gold bars. Where's the money? Amar le, I say, lo yadana hecha uzvinu. I have no idea what I did with it. I'm obviously not very good at my job. Also lekame de Rava. And they went and they asked a shaila to Rava. However, according to some, it is somebody else. It might be Rabba or Rav Papa. This is where you need to be super erudite, which I am not, where you have to compare and contrast this case with other Amoraim to know if this stims with Rava. So again, this on the bottom, it doesn't say all those details, but it does say that it might not be Rava. And Amar le, Rava has a rule of thumb. Kol lo yadana pshiusahi. any claim of a shomer where he says, I don't know, that's pshia. That's pshia. It's not, oops, I can't find it. I asked one of my kids yesterday, I'm like, by the way, I see that you got an absence. Why did you miss class? He said, I don't know. I said, sweetheart, that's not an answer. When you're in the workforce, your boss is going to say, where were you yesterday? You can't say, I don't know. That's not an accountable answer. It doesn't work. Same thing is true here. If you say, lo yadana, I don't know, you're a posheya, and you're obligated to repay in full whatever you were watching. So then Rava says to the guy, to the shomer, he says, Phil, zil shlim, go pay. Next. Someone's entrusting their friend with an item to watch, with money. And instead of me holding on to it, I gave it to my mother, mama's boy. She placed it in a box that has her own items in it. And someone, in an effort to steal stuff from them, stole this box. And in stealing this box, they also stole the gold bars that you asked me to watch. Amar Rava, how should a judge adjudicate this particular case? Because really, nobody did anything wrong except for the thief. Let's see why. Name a leila didei. If you want to say to the shomer zil shlim, that's not fair, because Omar, turning to the top of Membeis and Medbeis, the argument that this person could give is why. We already learned on Daf Lamed Vav Amud Aleph, Kol HaMafkid al das ishto uvanav hu mafkid, that when you entrust something to me, you are also, by halachic definition, entrusting me to give it to other members of my family. If I'm allowed to give it to my children and my wife, I'm certainly allowed to give it to my mother. So I did not do anything wrong. You can't hold me, the shomer, accountable. So says the Gemara, name ime. If you want to go back to the mother and say, Zili, Shlimi, you, mother of the shomer, you go and pay. Well, that's also not reasonable, because Amra, she would claim, Lo Amarli delabdi de ninhu da'akberinhu. He didn't tell me that it wasn't his and that I should go bury it. So name alay, then maybe the Bezdin will go to the shomer and say, well, why didn't you tell your mother that it needed to be buried? Amai lo amresla. So Amar, the son, the shomer, will say, why would I ever do that? If she's gonna need to bury something that isn't her son's, kol shekain d'chiamin Allah didininhu, tfei mizdaha. All the more so she's my mother. Of course she's gonna watch my item, and she'll watch it better than she'll watch your item. She's my mother. So the Gemara is a little bit torn. How do we navigate a case like this where really nobody is at fault? There's just no one to press. So the Gemara says as follows, 6 lines down, Mem Beis Med Beis, Amar Rava, Mishtabe'ihu, he, the shomer, makes a claim, Dehan huzuze ashlamin huleime. He makes a shvua that, yes, I gave it to my mother. Umishtaba'ime, and the mother also makes a shvua, Dehan huzuze osfinu bekartalisa, that she put it in her box in her room, the ignov, upater. They're just putter. It's just a case of geneva. No one is held accountable. Nothing was done incorrectly here, and you're just putter. And in a similar case, hahu aputropa diyasme, there was a guardian who was taking care of Yisomim, dezavan lahu Torah liyasme, umasre lebakra. He bought a shore with he bought a shore, a cow, with the estate's money. Umasre lebakra. He gave it over to a bakra. A bakra is someone who watches bakar, the equivalent of a shepherd. Lo havale kache v'shine. Now the animal that was purchased did not have teeth. Lemecha. He didn't notice, but the animal, the cow he bought, had no teeth. But in order for the animal to live, he needed to eat. Umis, and the animal died inadvertently. Here too, Amar Rami Bar Chama, how should a judge adjudicate a case like this? Nobody was at fault. Nobody did anything wrong. A third of the way down, what should we do? Name Malela Aputropa Zil Shlim? Should we go to the guardian and say, you need to pay? Amar, he'll say, why should I pay? Ana lebakra misarte. I gave it over to a guy whose job is literally to watch animals for a living. I did nothing wrong. So I, the aputropa, you cannot hold me accountable. Name Malela Bakra Zil Shlim. So what, we're going to turn to the bakra and say, you need to go pay? Why should he pay? Omar, Ana bahade tore ukimte. I put the animal that you entrusted in me with all of the other animals in the pen. Uchla shadoyle. I put enough food out in front of the animals for all of them to eat. And lo hava yadinan de lo achal. And I didn't know that your animal was toothless Betsy. I had no idea. I didn't know your animal was. So then says the Gemara, Michti, Bakra shomer sachar diyasmehu. The Bakra was being paid. He's a paid watchman. Why doesn't he have responsibility, a higher level of care? He should have looked to make sure that every animal was eating. And then he would have noticed that Betsy has no teeth. And then you switch to a liquid diet, whatever. But you're being paid as a bakra. So if you're being paid, maybe you are the guilty party here. Says the Gemara, if in fact the Yasomim would have lost out in this case when the animal died, you're absolutely right. Hachinami, that's true. But v'hacha b'mayaskinan, here in this case, we won't hold the bakra accountable because there's something unique happening in this case. What's that? There is no loss to the Yasomim. How is it that there's no loss to the Yasomim? They purchased money from their estate through a guardian, granted. The guardian took estate money, the estate credit card. He bought a cow, gave the cow to the bakra, and the cow died. So what do you mean there's no pseida, that there's no loss to the children, to the Yasomim? Says Gemara, de'ashkechuhu lemare de Torah, because they found the actual owner and said, hey, your animal died because he had no teeth. V'shakol yas mezuze mine, and then he evened up. The Yasomim took money back, so they were all evened out. So says the Gemara, then what was our initial question? Elaman katain, who's claiming money? Everybody's happy. I mean, the guy whose animal, who had to pay for the original seller of the animal is unhappy. So says the Gemara, it's him. Mari de Torah katain. Let's get the flow of events. Let's say that Chaim was the apotropos. He's an apotropa. He's a guardian for Yasomim. He has an estate credit card for the Yasomim. He goes to Shmerel and he buys a cow. So Shmerel sells the cow to Chaim on behalf of the Yasomim. They give it to Yaakov, the Bakra. Animal dies, no teeth. The owner, the original owner, the Shmerel, said, "Oh, I didn't realize the guy had no teeth. So here I'm paying you the Yasomim money." But he wants to get paid back. He feels like there might have been some negligence along the way. Someone should have told him that the animal had no teeth. So says the Gemara, what does that mean? You sold the animal. You are the original owner of the animal. You had to price out that animal. You had to feed that animal. You had to have known that the animal wasn't what you thought it was. How could Shmerel, the original owner, ask for money back? He must have known the animal's alive now. He must have found a way to feed that animal, even though he had no teeth. So therefore, the Gemara says, you're right. What we're talking about is besafsira. We're not talking about Shmerel, the original owner. We're talking about a middleman who only had the animal for a day. So the middleman bought it from Shmerel, Zvulun. Zvulun, the middleman, bought it and he quickly sold it. And this is the guy who lost out on money. The Zavan Mehacha, Umaz ben Lahacha, he's a middleman. So that was the guy who we're talking about. And therefore, we don't really know. Again, nobody really did anything wrong. Shmerel ended up losing money. The Safsira, had he actually paid for the animal, he would be out money, but it really wasn't his fault because he didn't have the animal for long enough. So therefore, Hilkach, Mishtaba Ihu Delo Havayada, one person has to make a Shavua, the Safsira, that he didn't know that there were no teeth. Mishalem Bakra, Dmei Basar Bizol. And in this case, the Bakra has to pay Dmei Basar Bizol. This is a phrase we had earlier in this Masechta and Daf Chaf. We'll see it again later. We had it in Ksubis and other places. And the Gemara says you have to pay 2/3 of the cost of the animal. That's what the Bakra needs to pay for because he really should have known better. That's his job. Our last story for the day with a couple of answers, and then we'll get to the top of Mem Gimel Amud Aleph and stop. Hahu Gavra, there was a man. To Ifkid Kshusa Gabe Chabre. He entrusted in me, you brought over a container of hops, which are used for beer. Havale Ledide Nami, Karya Deshusa. And I actually had my own container of hops as well. So I have a warehouse, and there was one box labeled Phil, another box labeled Tex. And Tex came over and said, Phil, please hold my hops. I'm going out of town. I said, no problem. And then Omar Le Lesarse, And for those who are wealthy, they have a sarse, which is a beer maker. Amar le sarse, mehai rami, I want you to go make me some beer. It's my house. Go take over there from that, right, a very poorly described box, from that container. So Azal Rama Meidach, he went and he didn't take from the one that was labeled Phil. My beer maker took from the container that was labeled Tex. So says the Gemara, Amar of Amram, what should we do? How should we adjudicate a case like this? If you want to say to me, the Shomer Phil, you owe me money, why? Amar ona amre le mehai rami. I told my beer maker where to take from. He made a mistake. Okay, so then maybe we should pivot and turn to the beer maker. Namely, l'sarse. Maybe we should say to the beer maker, Zil Shlim. So then he'll say, Amar le, lo Amar le. You, Phil, did not tell me, the beer maker, mehai rami, only take from the one that says Phil. Umehai lo tirmi, but don't take from the one that says tax. You didn't take that. And if, let's say, Texas container of hops was much further away, let's say mine was a 1 minute walk, so it's a 2 minute round trip. Texas is a 2 minute walk, so it's a 4 minute round trip to get to the hops. Maybe you can say that it was evident that it took the sarse much longer to come back. I must have known he was taking from Texas and not from mine, and therefore I'm guilty. So the Gemara says, B'delosha, no, there was no time difference. So says the Gemara, what is all the complaining? My pseida. Who cares? So I took out of Texas. I'll replenish it from mine. What do I care? Just take out, I'll even out the box, whatever. I know I can figure out exactly how much you gave me. I waited. I have the whatever. It's easy peasy. Why are we all concerned about stuff? Says the Gemara. A couple of possible answers. Says the Gemara. My pseida ika. Who cares? What is the big deal? Just replace it. You could just put it all back. So Amar Rav Sama Berei de Rava Tabashich Rechala. The reason why it's a problem is because the hops that were used made bad beer. You can't just replace it. There's something wrong with the hops. Or, says the Gemara, Ravashi Amar Bekise. We're talking about hops that actually had impurities in them. They had something like thorns. That's what Rashi says, 2 lines from the bottom. Bekise, Shoisa Kishos, the hops that we were dealing with were grua, were low level. The kotzim me'uravimba. The lo hishbiach hashechar kiritzono. The kasha be'enav shitilu besocha. This is not, you gave me shver hops. This makes terrible beer. And therefore, Mishalem le dmei kisei. And what he needs to do is he has to pay the reduction in cost based on the kisei. I mean, let's say that without the kisei, without the thorns and the hops, the beer would be worth $100 a barrel. Now it's worth $80 a barrel, so you owe me $20. You owe me the difference of 20. We'll stop right here at the Mishnah on the top of Mem Gimel. Emir Tashem, tomorrow night we'll learn Mem Gimel. And certainly we'll try and aim for the parak. That's probably a great stopping point, which is Mem Dalet Amud Aleph. Wishing you all a beautiful night.